The smell of burning sage and caramelized garlic filled the kitchen of Harrison's classic American grill as I put the finishing touches on my new special, Korean-inspired bulgogi burger with kimchi slaw and gochujang aioli. After 6 years as head chef of the Harrison Restaurant Empire's flagship location, I'd finally convinced my father-in-law to let me experiment with the menu. Or so I thought. "What the hell is this, David?" Robert Harrison's booming voice carried across the kitchen, making my line cooks flinch. "This isn't what Harrison's serves." I turned to face my father-in-law, still plating the sampled dishes for the evening's tasting menu. At 65, Robert Harrison was an imposing figure in his tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He built Harrison's from a single diner into a chain of 30 classic American restaurants across 3 states. "It's fusion cuisine, sir," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "The food industry is evolving. Our customers are looking for." "Our customers," he cut me off, "come to Harrison's for burgers, steaks, and apple pie. Not whatever this Asian nonsense is." I felt my sous chef Maria tense beside me. She'd been excited about the new menu, helping me perfect each recipe over the past month. "The test groups loved it," I said. "Sales are up 40% since we started the trial run." "Test groups?" Robert's face darkened. "You've been serving this to paying customers?" "Just as daily specials, and the response has been overwhelming." "Enough." He slammed his hand on the stainless steel prep table. "This stops now. Harrison's is about traditional American values, traditional American food. If you can't understand that, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." My wife Rachel appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the commotion. "Dad, what's going on?" "Your husband is trying to turn my restaurant into some kind of exotic food experiment," Robert snapped. "I won't have it." Rachel looked between us, her face tight with tension. She'd always been caught in the middle, daughter of the traditionalist restaurant mogul, wife of the innovative chef who trained in kitchens around the world before settling in her hometown. "The customers love David's new dishes," she said carefully. "Maybe we could try." "We're having a family dinner tonight," Robert interrupted. 7 p.m. sharp. "Don't be late." He turned on his heel and strode out, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and disapproval. "He's going to fire me, isn't he?" I asked Rachel once he'd gone. She didn't answer directly, but her expression said everything. "Just be prepared." I looked around the kitchen I'd run for 6 years, at the team I'd built. Maria caught my eye and nodded slightly. She knew what was coming too. That evening, we gathered in the private dining room of the flagship Harrison's. Robert sat at the head of the table, with his wife Margaret beside him. Rachel's younger brother Tom, recently graduated from business school and already being groomed to take over the company, sat across from us smirking. "I've made a decision," Robert announced after the appetizers. "David, your services will no longer be required at Harrison's. Your severance package will be generous, but your employment ends tonight." Despite expecting it, the words still hit hard. 6 years of 60-hour weeks of building the flagship location into the chain's highest-grossing restaurant erased because I dared to innovate. "Dad, please," Rachel began. But Robert held up his hand. "This is business, sweetheart. David clearly wants to cook his fancy foreign food. He can do that somewhere else." "Those fancy foreign dishes increased our profits by 40%, I pointed out. "Short-term novelty," Tom interjected. "It's not sustainable. People want comfort food they recognize." I thought about the notebooks in my home office, filled with recipes I'd developed but never been allowed to serve. About the business plan I'd been quietly working on for months, knowing this day might come. "You're right," I said calmly, surprising everyone at the table. "I should do this somewhere else." Robert's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You're taking this well." I smiled, thinking about the food truck I'd already purchased, the permits I'd secured, the social media campaign I'd planned with Maria, who'd agreed to join me in my new venture. "Consider it a lesson learned, sir. Harrison's clearly isn't ready for innovation. But thank you. You've helped me realize it's time to do something on my own." "On your own?" Tom laughed. "A fired chef with some foreign recipes. Good luck competing with Harrison's." I didn't respond to the taunt, just continued eating the bland, overcooked steak that represented everything wrong with Harrison's menu. Later that night, as Rachel and I drove home, she finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. "You have a plan, don't you? Remember the empty lot on 4th Street? The one that all the office buildings overlook? She nodded slowly. I bought it last month. The city just approved it for food truck operations. The lot must have cost every penny of my inheritance from my parents, I confirmed, plus the loan I took out against my life insurance. Rachel was quiet for a moment. You knew Dad would fire you. I knew he'd never let me cook the food I wanted to cook. The food people actually want to eat. I glanced at her. Are you okay with this? She reached over and squeezed my hand. I've eaten your food for 8 years. I've seen how people react to it. Dad's living in the past, trying to serve the same meals he sold 40 years ago. It's time for something new. 2 weeks later, Soul Food Revolution rolled onto 4th Street for its first day of business. The bright food truck, decorated with a fusion of Korean and American street art, stood up against the corporate backdrop. Maria worked the prep station while I handled final assembly and service. The menu was everything Harrison's wouldn't allow: bulgogi cheese steaks, kimchi-loaded fries, gochujang chicken sandwiches, and my signature Korean-American fusion burgers. We promoted heavily on social media, and a small crowd had already gathered before we opened. By noon, a line stretched around the block. Office workers posted photos of their lunches. Food bloggers showed up to film reviews. Local news stations sent reporters to cover the innovative new food concept, taking the city by storm. And watching it all from his office window in Harrison's corporate headquarters across the street was Robert Harrison, who'd chosen this building specifically so he could oversee his flagship restaurant. Now he had a perfect view of his son-in-law's rebellion against everything he thought he knew about the restaurant business. As I assembled another bulgogi burger, I glanced up at the corporate tower and smiled. This was just the beginning. The first food truck was a proof of concept. Soon there would be more. A fleet of trucks serving different fusion cuisines, each one parked strategically near a Harrison's location. Let them stick to their overdone steaks and soggy fries. I had something better. Food that told a story, that brought cultures together, that excited people's palates and imaginations. By the end of our first week, we'd served over 2,000 customers. Our social media following had exploded, and 3 different investors had reached out about franchising opportunities. But the real validation came from the customers, the joy on their faces as they tried something new, the way they came back day after day, bringing friends and family to experience what we created. This wasn't just about proving Robert Harrison wrong. It was about proving that food could be more than just fuel, more than just familiar comfort. It could be an adventure, a connection, a revolution. And speaking of revolution, I hadn't told anyone about the lease I'd just signed for a vacant restaurant space directly across from Harrison's flagship location. The food truck was just phase 1. The real game was about to begin. 3 months after launching Soul Food Revolution, I stood in the empty restaurant space across from Harrison's, envisioning what it would become. The lease had been signed in secret, and renovations were set to begin next week. But first, we had another milestone to celebrate. My phone buzzed, a message from Rachel. Dad's watching the National Restaurant Awards live stream. You might want to turn it on. I smiled and pulled up the stream on my tablet. The prestigious annual awards were a big deal in the industry, and Harrison's had been trying to win Best Innovation in Dining for years. Robert Harrison had even hired consultants to help modernize their menu, though he'd rejected all their suggestions as too radical. The host began announcing the innovation category. This year's winner revolutionized the concept of fusion cuisine and mobile dining, creating not just a new menu but a new dining culture in their city. The award for Best Innovation in Dining goes to Soul Food Revolution. I watched the camera cut to Robert Harrison's face in the audience, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Tom, sitting beside him, actually dropped his drink. My phone exploded with notifications. The first was from Maria. We did it, chef, turn around. I turned to find my entire team, now 12 strong, crowding into the empty restaurant space. They'd brought champagne, Korean beer, and containers of our most popular dishes. Speech, they chanted. This award belongs to all of us, I said, raising a bottle. To the revolution. To the revolution. As we celebrated, Rachel arrived with news from the awards ceremony. Dad's furious, she reported, grinning. Especially since the judges specifically praised our bold reimagining of classic American cuisine. Exactly what he fired you for doing. The next day, local media picked up the story. Fired chefs, food truck beats former employer for national award. The headlines wrote themselves. David versus Goliath, innovation trumps tradition. How a food truck changed the game. But I wasn't done yet. It was time for phase 2. The renovation of the restaurant space began, but we kept the windows papered over. Rumors spread about what was coming. The anticipation built as our food trucks, now a fleet of 5, each serving different fusion cuisines, continued drawing crowds across the city. Robert Harrison finally confronted me one morning as I was prepping the original truck. "What's your game, David?" he demanded. "First the food truck, now that building. Are you trying to destroy everything I've built?" I continued chopping vegetables calmly. "No, sir. I'm building something new. Something that should have been obvious to you years ago." "And what's that?" "The future." I looked up at him. Food isn't just about tradition. It's about evolution, creativity, bringing people together. Every cuisine you call traditional was fusion once. "Nonsense," he scoffed. People want choice," I interrupted. "They want excitement, authenticity, connection. While you've been serving the same menu for 40 years, the world has changed. Your customers have changed." As if to prove my point, a group of office workers walked past Harrison's to join the growing line at our truck. "You're prepared to throw away your marriage over this?" he asked, playing his last card. "Ask Rachel if she's happier eating dried-out meatloaf or bulgogi burgers," I suggested. "Better yet, ask your shareholders about your latest quarterly results." He flinched. Harrison's profits had been declining steadily since we opened, especially at their flagship location. "You can't beat us with a few food trucks," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Watch me." 2 months later, we opened Revolution. Not just a restaurant, but a culinary experience. The space featured an open kitchen, communal tables, and a menu that changed daily based on customer feedback and seasonal ingredients. The walls displayed local art, and we hosted cultural education events alongside our dining service. On opening night, we had a line around the block. Food critics raved about our bold reinvention of American dining. Even better, our customers understood what we were doing, creating not just meals, but connections between cultures, between people, between traditions and innovations. Harrison's tried to compete. They introduced a fusion menu that missed the point entirely, soulless combinations without understanding or respect for the cultures they borrowed from. Their customers saw through it immediately. 6 months after Revolution opened, Robert Harrison requested a meeting. He came alone to the restaurant after closing. "You've won," he said simply, looking around at the packed dining room. "Our sales are down 60%. 3 locations have closed. The board is talking about new direction and rebranding." "I never wanted to win," I replied. "I wanted to create something meaningful, something that brings people together instead of clinging to an imaginary past." He was quiet for a long moment. "Tom resigned yesterday, said he couldn't fix what was broken." Another pause. "The board wants new leadership. Someone who understands the modern restaurant industry." I saw where this was going. "I'm not interested in taking over Harrison's, not even to save your wife's inheritance." "Rachel is a partner in Revolution," I told him. "She believes in what we're building here. And if you actually ate our food, really tasted it, really thought about what we're trying to do, you might understand why." To my surprise, he sat down at one of our tables. "Show me." I went to the kitchen and prepared a special tasting menu, dishes that told the story of our revolution. Korean-American fusion, yes, but also dishes that showcase how all cuisine is fusion, how flavors and techniques cross borders and cultures. As he ate, I explained each dish's history, its cultural significance, its role in bringing people together. Gradually, I saw something change in his expression. "This isn't just food, is it?" he said finally. "No," I agreed. "It's culture, history, family, innovation, all on one plate. That's what I was trying to tell you 3 years ago." 2 weeks later, Robert Harrison announced his retirement. The board hired a progressive CEO who immediately reached out to discuss collaboration rather than competition. But we had our own path to follow. Revolution expanded to multiple locations, each partnering with local chefs to create unique fusion concepts. Our food trucks continued operating, now serving as incubators for new ideas and talent. We started a culinary education program, teaching not just cooking techniques but cultural understanding and respect. A year after that dinner with Robert, we hosted a special event, a family dinner that brought together all the cultures and flavors that had shaped our journey. Robert attended, bringing Margaret and even Tom, who had found his own path in restaurant consulting. As we shared dishes and stories, I watched my father-in-law actually listening to our young chefs explain their inspirations and innovations. He'd finally understood that preserving tradition doesn't mean freezing it in time. It means allowing it to grow, to evolve, to revolutionize. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. "Not bad for a fired chef with some foreign recipes," she whispered. I looked around at what we'd built, not just a successful business, but a community. Our restaurants weren't just places to eat. They were places to connect, to learn, to grow. The revolution wasn't just about food. It was about breaking down barriers and bringing people together. And as I watched Robert Harrison enthusiastically discussing kimchi techniques with our Korean-born sous chef, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about proving someone wrong. They're about showing them a better way forward. The food revolution hadn't just changed the restaurant industry, it had changed us all. And that was the most satisfying dish I'd ever served.